Hey budget gardeners, Vita Loca here. Spring has sprung. Join me today as I give you an early April garden tour. So let's go. I live in New Hampshire. I garden in USDA Zone 5B, and I have some pretty blooms happening in the yard right now. And then there are a lot of plants that are just waking up. I'm going to turn the camera around and let me show you what's happening in my yard right now. I refer to this bed as my side walkway bed for the reason that right behind me is my side walkway. And that's actually the entrance that we use the most when we enter and leave our house. We've been living in this house for 20 years now. And what you're looking at on the screen is what this flower bed looked like when we first bought the house. During the last many years, this flower bed has seen many iterations. In fact, isn't that what gardening's all about? We're always changing things, we're always adding things or removing things that we like or that we don't like. I've definitely done that in many flower beds, but especially this one. In fact, I thought it would be fun to pop up on the screen how this flower bed has evolved over the last many years, just so you could see what it's looked like and how I've changed it over the years. What I'm going to do now is walk you around this bed and give you a close-up look at what is blooming or what is going to bloom in the near future. In between the two windows, right here, there's an ornamental grass, a miscanthus. It's going to get very tall and it's really going to fill in that space towards the back of this bed. We've had some nights that have been in the low to mid 20-degree Fahrenheit range. So the crocuses are trying their best. In fact, this one here looks really, really pretty still. And I recently made a video showing you my process for just adding some snowdrops into this area along with the crocuses. Towards the front of the bed are some dianthus. There are some hot pink colors as well as white, and then there's a different kind of dianthus over there. And as I go along with this garden tour, please drop comments below if there's anything you want to know more about. I'd be more than happy to tell you. Right behind this dianthus here is a perennial mum. It looks so pretty when it bloomed in the fall time, and we just cut it back barely a few weeks ago. I will be bringing you along when it's time for me to start dividing this perennial and moving it around my yard. Around this rock here are some daffodils, and they're just the regular yellow type of daffodils that you find. But the special thing about these daffodils, like many things in my yard, is that my mother-in-law gave me a small piece of the daffodils from her yard. And over the last many, many years, I just keep dividing and moving those daffodils all around my yard. And you can see that they are all budded up. It's just a matter of weeks and they'll be blooming. And don't worry, I'll do another garden tour and show you what they look like when they're blooming. As many of you know, a lot of the plants in my yard were not plants that I bought. They were very small divisions that I got from my late mother-in-law's home. This includes this plant right here. This is called Gloria the Snow, and it is such a beautiful spring flower. I love it, and I have this divided all around my yard as well. You can see that only a few blooms are open right now, but give it time, and this plant will be blooming before you know it. There'll be a ton of blooms on it. Isn't it just so sweet? I love the color. The snowdrops were the very first bulbs to bloom in my yard. They are still looking very sweet, but within another week or so, I think they'll be going by and they'll allow other plants to bloom in the yard. Their heads are nodding down, but when you lift them, look how sweet they are. A few years ago, I divided a whole bunch of grape hyacinths or muscari, and I put them towards the front of the daffodils. So you can see they're all just starting to pop up. Another bulb that's just barely starting to pop up is the hyacinth. It's not a grape hyacinth, but it is a hyacinth. It's another spring bulb. And these are spring bulbs that I got from my parents' house before they sold their home. For the sake of not repeating myself, I'll just let you know that a lot of these plants are originally from my mother-in-law's home. They started off as the smallest little pot of plants, and I've just divided them over time. These little pink flowers are one of many plants from her home. They are called a spring larkspur. Another name for them is fumewort. They just are so cute. I love them. I love how their little frilly leaves look. I love the little pink flowers. I originally planted these in my front yard in a large flower bed that I don't walk by very often. And then I said, no, why did I do that? So I dug them up and I moved them. And I moved them to a place where I can really enjoy them here at the side walkway garden. There are many other plants that are in this flower bed, but they're not really waking up yet. So rather than go through all the flowers in here, I think in future tours, I'll just highlight them as they're putting on more growth and as they're starting to bloom. The last thing I want to point out in this flower bed is a mum that we planted together right over here. It's a type of hardy or garden mum, and they typically are perennial here where I live, as well as many other zones. So if you've never overwintered mums, I highly recommend it. My brother and sister-in-law made this cold frame for me a number of years ago. To be honest with you, I haven't put it to great use. I'd like to try to do that this year. We'll see if I get to it. The only thing that's in here right now are 2 buckets of hardwood cuttings that we took together during the winter months. This one right here is the Annabelle hydrangea, and the one right next to it is forsythia. And very exciting, they are putting on some new growth. I've been good about checking them and giving them water as needed. But as it gets warmer, probably next week, I'm going to have to start opening up my cold frame because I don't want it to get too hot in here. As we leave the side walkway bed, which by the way is located on the south side of my house, and we cross over the driveway, we come over to another patch of lawn here. And this area gets a fair amount of sun, the side walkway bed as well as what I call the long flower bed, just because it is quite a long bed. And this bed has seen a lot of changes during the years. What I'll also do is pop up on the screen just the different images that I have of this flower bed over the last many years, just so you can see how it's evolved. On a different day, I'll bring you out here, and together we're going to tackle cleaning up this bed. But for right now, let me take you in for a closer look to show you what's waking up. There is a perennial in this flower bed that I think everyone should have. It's called the fringed bleeding heart. It's not the typical bleeding heart that a lot of you might have seen before. It just looks so pretty when it was blooming, and you can see that it's starting to wake up. I just need to come in here and pull back all the old growth. What I love about this particular bleeding heart, and by the way, it comes in white as well as pink flowers, is that it doesn't just die back during the heat of the summer, at least not here in New Hampshire. The old-fashioned bleeding heart usually does. This bleeding heart blooms all spring, summer, and fall for me in New Hampshire. I just love it so much. Other than removing the top growth off of the bleeding heart, we also need to come in here and we're going to just pull out all of these old annuals that bloomed last year. That's where I had some vinca, and towards the front is where I had some begonias last year. Those were plants that I had started from seed, so we're going to be removing those just to clean it up. There is a hydrangea in this bed. I don't know what kind it is, but I can tell you one thing. I am not very good about cutting back or pruning back my hydrangeas. Well, we're going to go after it this year. I'm not an expert when it comes to pruning hydrangeas, but I've watched enough videos that I pretty much know what I need to do. And at the base of the hydrangea are a whole bunch of daffodils. And these are just daffodils that I just keep dividing and moving around the yard, much like many of the perennials in my yard. That's the name of the game. You're going to hear me say it often. Divide and move if you want to increase your stock in any plant. I can't wait until these bloom so I can show you what it looks like. As we come around on the corner, many of the flowers that are in this flower bed are basically creating a pattern. I'm basically repeating the same plants in an effort to try to make a little bit of an impact. So the first plant I want to point out is pulmonaria, or lungwort. And it is trying so hard to get through last year's old debris. So the next week it's supposed to be much warmer. So we're going to tackle this bed together and free the pulmonaria. Just look how pretty they are. I just love lungwort so much. And if you're wondering which variety of lungwort I have, I can't answer that because this came from my mother-in-law's. I just know it's a lungwort, but I don't know which variety it is. And right near the lungwort is more of the beautiful fumewort. The fumewort is still budded up quite a bit. I would say in about 1 week, it's really going to put on a nice show, and it actually blooms for a long time. They're just so pretty, even though they're tiny. They're a very small plant. It's definitely a plant that you want to put towards the front of a flower bed. I just think they're so vibrant. The peonies are just starting to wake up. In fact, in this flower bed, there are a ton of peonies. I just love that plant so much. So they're really packed in this flower bed. There's a tree stump right there. There used to be a fairly large sized tree, and during the winter months we did have the tree cut down. If any of you have been watching my videos, I did mention that I planned on cutting that tree down. It was casting a lot of shade on this flower bed, and seeing that my yard has a lot of woods around it, if I can get areas where I get more pockets of sun, I really try hard to do that. So it'll be interesting to see how much extra sun comes in here without that tree being in this flower bed. There are also a lot of stelladoro daylilies in here, as well as many other perennials. You can see that there are a bunch of daffodils coming up, and just look at the show that the fumewort is putting on. Here's another lungwort in this flower bed. I just think it's so interesting that you get the purple flowers as well as the pink flowers. It makes it a very interesting plant. And then once the blooms go by, the spots on the leaves really stand out, especially in a shady spot of the yard. This area is called Work in Progress. I have a bunch of raised beds here, and they mostly have strawberries, blueberries, as well as raspberries in them. The soil level needs to be raised, the strawberries need to be thinned out, and I'll be moving around the raised beds in possibly my fire pit because I have a greenhouse that's going to be installed. I'm not sure when it's going to get installed. It's a greenhouse that I bought at a very good price on Facebook Marketplace at the end of last year. So I'll give you an update on that when the time comes. And I did want to point out, right over here, there are 3 hydrangeas. And I gave you a little clip of what one of the hydrangeas looks like just in this past little reel of pictures that you saw. So the hydrangeas will be looking really pretty. I'll be coming in soon to basically cut them back. Again, I mentioned earlier, I'm not great about cutting back my hydrangeas, but this will be the year that I get after it. The last thing I wanted to point out was in the corner, I have my compost bin. I have a bunch of compost left over from last year, so we'll be getting into that compost because I need to use it in all my hanging baskets, window boxes, containers, and I like to mix it in with potting mix, just to make it a little bit more of a richer type of potting mix. So I will be bringing you in on a different day, showing you my process for not only depleting that compost pile, but also I have a compost bin that's full and needs to be basically opened up. I need to mix up all the material in there and get it heated up so that I have compost later this season. As we swing this way, back across the driveway, I have a very small flower bed, and it's located right over here. It's right next to my side walkway bed. I call this small flower bed the old arborvitae bed. What I'm going to do is put up on the screen some old footage of how this bed has evolved over the last many years. In the center of the bed is a ground cover called ajuga, and there are also a bunch of small rhododendrons. They are very small still. I got them when my mother-in-law passed away, and I had them actually up along my driveway. They didn't thrive, but I do think that they're doing much better in this flower bed, and I'll be giving them some fertilizer like I do every spring. Another perennial that's in this bed is candytuft, and I have a number of candytuft that's in here because I've divided it over the last many years. A new addition to this bed last spring were some spring bulbs. I basically divided them and moved them from other areas of my yard. And I did them after they were done blooming, and that's called moving them in the green. And they're all around in this bed, and one of the spring bulbs is Glory of the Snow. When I do my next garden tour, I'll be sure to bring you along in this bed because it's going to look so pretty when it blooms. There's another spring bulb that I put in this bed from a different area of my yard, and it's called Alpine Squill, and you can see it's all budded up. I hope you enjoyed this garden tour. I thought it was important to just bring you along with the history of my yard, and I really hope that it inspired you in some way or the other. If you have any questions or any comments, I'd love to hear from you. And until the next video, make it a great day with gardening.